Edgar and I will spend the next hour in conversation. The idea behind this session is to have a conversation with Edgar, learn more about some of his recent projects, and in particular, focus on what the relationship is that Edgar is interested in with curators and with various curatorial uh, spaces or forms that happen within institutions that he's been working within, and to see how these work for him. So I thought that I would start by reading the first sentence in Edgar's bio that you received with this Eventbrite, because I think it's a very interesting sentence to start this whole adventure. He says he is an artist, director, writer, and organizer who constructs drawings, installations, video, and film works as complex arrangements of association that examine adjacencies and points of contact between implausible relations. He directed his first play in 2015, for which he was awarded the Malcolm McLaren Best of Show Award, and his latest play premiered in the US in 2023. And I like very much that Edgar starts his bio by giving a kind of a feeling or an atmosphere as to what kind of practice he might have without going into specificities. And I think that's very suitable for the way in which you actually practice, Edgar. So it's great to see that even through to your bio, you are somebody that likes to place a constellation or a cloud of thoughts that we can then kind of start to draw from. So,
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, apologies to everyone who joined. We were under the assumption that we would actually see you and be able to have a conversation. But Kate and I have known each other for a long time, so I'm happy just to talk to you and have the rest of you peering in from the dark veil of technology. Seems quite appropriate considering the election that's coming up.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I thought for the conversation today that I would use um a number of strategies that I use to create my work, and describe those strategies to illustrate them. And I think of it as this like how to make things present without trying to represent them. And there's three projects in particular that I wanted to talk about. Two of them are performances and or plays, and then one of them is a series of paintings that I've been making for the last 3 or 4 years. It's called Skinning the Mirror. And as you mentioned earlier, my first play, Until was commissioned by Performa, and I love working on that and bringing it into the world. And I started working on a second play around 2018 and brought it to fruition in 2023. So it's about 6 years, 7 years of work to get Boni Manili into the world. So Kate, what I was thinking is I could just kind of I can share my screen and then start to draw a little bit with the audience. And yeah, we can't even see their reactions either. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
so if you guys have any
you and
questions or anything along the way, I think that um,
I think
you
people
can,
can type into the Q&A,
yeah,
and
yeah,
at
yeah,
least you can see that there is life beyond the
yeah, exactly. So how does that sound for those of you who are out there if I do a little bit of drawing for you and then I'll show you some images of my work?
Mark
Um,
raised his hand.
all right, somebody raised their hand. I'll take that as a positive. Okay, let me go ahead and share.
And I'll keep quiet as you're doing this, Edgar, and then like as you get a little bit further in, then we can start
Oh,
kind of
I
have a
don't know if you need
conversation.
to be quiet. But you know, it's good to be able to kind of throw it back and forth. At least I have one person I can see and talk. So the title of this talk is making present the unrepresentable. And the three strategies that I want to share with you all today. One is called the gutter. The other one is called decentering, and then the third one is called dislocation. Um, I'll 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 illustrate all three as concepts first, And then I'll show you guys some work, and then I'll reference back to these strategies of how to make present the unrepresentable. Okay, so let me go ahead and stop sharing and do this. I'm just gonna pull up a whiteboard here. Let's see, where do I find that?
I saw they were in more.
Okay. All right. So this first strategy that I want to share with you all is called decentering. So let me just make a little illustration here. And can you guys tell me, can you see my screen? Two.
Yes, 4, 5. Lots of people are saying yes.
Thank you. All right. So let's imagine that we're looking at a drawing by one of my favorite impressionists, Cezanne, and that this is a tree in a landscape with a road disappearing off into the distance. So with the Impressionists, they were interested in a couple different things. But for those of you who can type, I mean, remind us what was one of the kind of the key interests of the Impressionists now that they can go out into the world and do plein air painting. Can someone remind me?
You can
Remind us.
only go into the Q&A. You can't go into chat, people. So
Oh, they can't write anything?
Emily Butler just said you can only go into Q&A.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to imagine. Oh, that very good, Vivian. Yes, exactly. So on the level of well, okay. So, even though they were doing a painting of a tree, they were really interested in how light works, right? So when you got up close to it, then the image would start to kind of come apart. But so they were really interested in the optics of how we saw the tree. So we can say that the content of the picture is tree, right? But what the subject matter of is not the tree, but how we see tree, right? Is the actual subject. So in that way, even though there is a picture of a tree inside of the painting, in reality, the actual content of the picture or the meaning of the picture is actually outside of it. And by that I mean that the way in which the picture actually works is that it comes together within the vantage point of the viewer, right? So in the eyeball of the perceiver, right? I'm doing my best to draw an eyeball with the cursor. So yeah, it kind of comes together within the mind of the viewer who's looking at this thing, right? So in that way, even though I'm showing you one thing, what I'm actually talking about is not in the picture. And this strategy of creating or I should say of non-representation is called dislocation. Okay. Does that make sense to you all? And I guess all you can do is give me thumbs up and thank you. All right, this is interesting. All right, let's move on. So again, dislocation, I'm showing you one thing, but what it's actually about is not in the picture, but it sits outside of the picture. Another strategy is called decentering. And so let's imagine that we are in the theater. Okay. And there's a wall that's dividing the space in two. Oops. And down here is the audience. Watching the show. there's two sides of the stage, and the stage is divided in half by this wall. On one side of the wall, you have a kind of very irate person. He's quite upset because he's on the phone with his calling his wife and wondering why she's not picking up. Then on the other side of the wall, there is a bed. And in that bed, we see this. I know you guys are saying, what is he drawing? On this side of the bed, you see two faces underneath a blanket, and they are kind of kissing and making whoopee, and there's little hearts flying in the air, right? As part of the scene, there's a cell phone on the floor, and it's buzzing, buzz, 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 buzz. Okay, so as the director of the show, what are we asking you to focus on? Are we asking you to focus on the left side of the stage? Are we asking you to focus on the right side of the stage? Or are we asking you to look elsewhere? And if all of you were here, you would answer elsewhere. But in reality, what the director is asking you to do is not focus on one or the other, but both. And by doing that, it combines both of them together into category C, which is the space where the audience is. So as a strategy of representation, this is a way of making a relationship palpable without actually showing it, but by expressing it through an interaction. And this strategy is called decentering, by pushing things to the left and to the right. And similar to the other strategy that I showed you before, the idea is that this is realized within the eye of the beholder, really valuing that the gap that exists between these two things is not only meaningful, but essential. All right. Are you guys following me so far? How is this?
I am.
Okay. We have
Other
a
pe-
few
yeah.
minutes. Thank you, Kurt, and the other
Kurt
person.
raised. I wonder if I can get Kurt to.
Okay. Let's talk about one more. And if you guys have any questions, you can.
I'm just trying to do something radical and allow everybody to talk.
Oh, well, look at that. There's faces popping in. Okay. So let's talk about one more strategy. And this strategy is called the gutter.
Okay, I think everybody is now
Inside.
show up.
Well, look at that. Now, they may not want to be seen, actually. That's the one thing.
Mhm.
If you don't want to be seen, keep yourself hidden. But if you guys want to be sympathetic to my plight, you can say say hello to me. All right. So let's imagine that we're looking at a comic strip. And in that comic strip is some very simple elements. We have this. Okay. So with this masterful image, now that you all can speak, what who wants to try and interpret this magnificent comic? Kurt, is that a hand up, or is
His
that just
hand's been up for a while, so.
up for a long time? Okay, I'll pretend you guys aren't still there. So just from these elements, like this little round shape and three lines plus a horizon, You're able to get a sense of scale. Something is big, it's a little bit smaller, than a little bit smaller. You might get a sense of velocity. This thing is moving at a certain speed, and you might get a sense of depth, all through these simple elements. Now, the question is, how were you able to figure that out? How are you able to read this image? For most of us, we might assume that when we read comic books, it's really just about what's inside the picture, right? But in reality, it's not only what's inside the picture, but we also read the gaps in between the pictures. It's in this space where in comics they call that space the gutter, that we project ourselves. Um, because we have to go through this act of kind of a psychological exercise called seaming, where you take one image, take another, and take another, and even though they're frozen, we're able to stitch them together into a larger narrative. And if any of you have read the book Understanding Comics, this is where I got this concept from. But basically, if you're a baby, if you play peekaboo with a baby, they don't have this psychological function to um, be able to see who you are. Like they don't understand when you put your hands in front of their face that you're not disappearing. But when we get older and we learn about logic and reason, and we're able to seam things together because we can project into the gaps. So with this strategy, the idea is like, how do we harness the power of the gap? Because it's in the gap that we become active agents in the completion of the work. But more importantly, it values the distinct experience. I'm spelling experience wrong. Experience of each person. Okay. So those are the three strategies. Let me just recap real quick. So dislocation as a strategy means I'm showing you one thing. And in the case of Cezanne's tree, I'm showing you a tree, but what it's actually about, meaning its subject matter, is how we see the tree. So I'm showing you one thing, but what it's really about is not in the picture. In the case of decentering, we're dividing a space so that what it's actually about, its focal point, is not in the middle, but is pushed to the sides. And in this way, you as the viewer become active participant because you have to bring these two things together. In the strategy of harnessing the gutter, it's another example of how do we harness the power of the gap. And again, the value for me in using these different strategies, and I spelled that intentionally wrong so that you would pay attention to it, is that you will project yourself into that space, and that the work is now kind of a thinking machine. All right. Are there any questions about that? Some of you guys can now actually write in the chat. So if you don't have any questions, I'll start to show you guys some work. I'll give you a second to decide if you want to ask anything. Okay. No questions? Should I move on? Somebody raise their hand if I should move on.
Maybe we've disabled. Oh, look, there you go.
Let's
Hands
go.
raised.
Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and move on to showing you guys some images. So the first thing that I want to show you is a trailer for my first play, Until. And it kind of says what it's about in the trailer. So I'm just going to share that with you. And please let me know if you cannot hear the sound. Can you hear that?
No,
Not at all.
nada.
Okay, then I'm gonna just speak over it. Okay, so if you're looking at the images, Until is based on a performance that the actor Ben Vereen did in 1981, in which he performed in blackface in front of at Ronald Reagan's inaugural gala. He meant it to be a kind of a critique, but also a tribute to the vaudevillian performer Burt Williams. But what he didn't know is that ABC television edited out the second part of the performance, the part that contained the critique, and American audiences only saw Ben Vereen performing in blackface in front of like 20,000 white Republicans. So you can imagine that the backlash from the media was harsh, and he was attacked by all of his heroes like Ruby Dee and Ozzie Davis, Jesse Jackson, Sammy Davis Jr., who had already gotten in trouble for hugging, Richard Nixon. So, he really became isolated. He was friends with Frank Sinatra, who produced this event, and Johnny Carson, and they basically all blackballed him. So for more than 30 years, this performance that, is incredibly moving, at least in the second part of it as well. But American audiences were never able to see that were never able to see the second act of the performance. So when I was in my undergraduate studies at Art Center in 1996, 97, I actually saw the performance as part of a documentary on African American art, and I didn't realize how fortunate I was at the time, because I actually saw the second act as a part of the documentary, at least a clip of it. And I thought that it was so strange, but it was also so incredible and so moving that I never forgot about it. So in 2014, 2015, Adrian Edwards, who's now at the Whitney, but was at Performa at the time, approached me and asked me if I would like to do a performance. And I had made some films before, but I had never done anything live for the stage. So when I had an idea for this, I started to pitch it to them, but then I went to this birthday party. It's actually a 5-year-old birthday party that I was not invited to. I crashed this party, and who was there, sitting there at the bar, was Ben Vereen. So I went up to him, I spoke to him, and he was very gracious when I told him I was a fan, and then he told me, and I asked him about this 81 performance, and he kind of shrunk in his seat. And it wasn't until later that I learned the rest of the story from him, when he allowed me to come to his home and sit with him and allow me to tell his story. That birthday party that I crashed was at the Underground Museum, and the artist, who some of you may know, Karan Davis, that's her father, and she's married to the late sort of great painter. Oh my God, I can't believe I just forgot his name. Noah Davis. So we wrote and performed the play in 2015 in New York, and to my surprise, we won the top prize in the festival, and became a theater person. So that's until. So of those 3 strategies that I just showed you, which one did I implore to try to tell this story? So let me talk about that. Let's see. Can you guys see what I'm drawing here? Yeah. Okay. So I'll make some drawing on this screen. So, when dealing with the subject of blackface, right? It was a subject that I told myself that I was never going to deal with, because it exists in this strange space of symbols, which in linguistics they call a tensor side, meaning it's so deeply entangled with emotions that you can't really disentangle it and take it outside of a kind of a moral framework. So, it's like the swastika for some people, or a cross burning on the lawn, or blackface would be considered a subject matter where it's too there's too many moral judgments on it for you to be able to see it directly. So what I did was that I used decentering as a strategy, and what I mean by that is, and how do I change the color on this? So what I did was that I decided to tell the story about the history of blackface and Burt Williams, not by centering it around the blackface performance, but how Ben Vereen remembers it, which is as a series of trauma. So by focusing on the way that Ben remembers it, then it allowed for the story to be told as like a series of almost hallucinations. And and this is a little bit abstract. I apologize because you guys can't see the whole story. But if any of you are interested in watching the film that you just saw there, I'm happy to share with you the link, which is password protected. But you can write me, and I'm happy to share it with you. So I basically created the story as a giant loop. So it starts in 1981 and it ends in 1981. Then in the beginning of the show, we see like the first 5 minutes of the performance, and then we travel like 100 years of history. And as part of the ending of the show, I actually bring the audience who's sitting over here in the bleachers, right? So the audience is sitting here during most of the show, right? So they're kind of watching it from here, and they think that the show is happening over here on the stage with this guy doing this blackface performance, kicking around, with his kicking and dancing, in blackface with his top hat on. But by the end of the show, the entire audience is brought onto the stage, and then they get to watch it the full 10 minutes from here. And my way of imagining the space of the stage was that this side of the curtain, and this is meant to be the divide, this side of the curtain was 1981. And no, I'm sorry. This side of the TV audience. And then this side of the curtain was 1981. So anything that happened over here was the past. And by the end of the show, the entire audience comes to realize that the show is actually about them, about how they see, how they perceive this kind of performance. So is it kind of trickery on my part when people come in, they don't realize that they actually are what the show is about? So decentering is one of the strategies that I used amongst others in the work. Let's see, how am I doing time wise?
You've got 20 minutes.
Okay. Let me move on. So, and just in case I don't get to my next performance, Kate, how is this going so far? Do you think this is
I
moving
think it's
along
good. I
okay?
think that to talk about exactly Taipei and to kind of like make the connections, then there are many things we can
Sure.
discuss.
Okay. So, I made this giant painting in Taipei. I'm gonna show you guys a few process photos as well. Um, just so that I can kind of ground the entire thing. So uh, last year, I was invited to participate in a biennial in Taipei, the Taipei Biennale. It was my first time there. I had never been to Taipei before, so found it to be an incredibly enriching experience, and also just kind of remarkable to be in a place which is so beautiful and kind of nestled inside this, what to me felt like a garden state compared to Los Angeles, but also dealing with a great amount of tension right on its borders with China. So it feels like a place that's on the cusp of a change that they may or may not want. Um, so when I was invited to come there, and especially when I found out what my space was, I decided to make a painting using this technique called skinning the mirror. And skinning the mirror is essentially a process where I take a mirror, I'll strip it from the back so that the silver is exposed. And then I start to paint on it, draw on it, scrape into it in a way that builds up a series of layers. Let me show you guys a few images. And these are a little bit out of sequence, so please forgive me if I jump around a bit. So just to give you a sense of the scale, this is the painting, me sort of shooting it from above. This is 36 feet. Actually, this is about 40 feet right now by approximately 10 or 12 feet tall. And the surface that I'm painting on right now is just a mirror. So as I'm painting on it, I'm walking on it, and it's breaking and it's shattering underneath my feet. And as I'm building up the layers, you know, part of it is, you know, I'm pouring paint onto the surface. Maybe you, well, the sound's not working, so you won't be able to hear it. But the the mirror is like cracking underneath my feet. Um, and then at a certain point in the process, I start to I lay the canvas down onto onto the surface, and then I start to peel it back. Because of the size of the canvas, I had to use a local broom. I love using brooms for processes like this. But I wanted to give you a sense of the skinning process as well, like what that looks like, to grab the canvas and start to peel it away. Okay, forgive me, there's a few personal photographs in here as well, so just act like you can't see those. Okay, let's see, maybe this is a good example here. So you can see the canvas after it's been laid down, and the paint has adhered itself to the back of the silver. Then I'll take it and I'll start to pull it back, skin it. Be honest, I really wanted this to have a white bit. This is my little personal diary here. But I'll start to grab it and then I'll pull it back, and it's a very kind of muscular process to do this. And the result at the end looks like this. Can you see this image of the painting, Kate?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things about the process that I find endlessly fascinating is that once the silver is exposed to the elements, once it's exposed to the atmosphere, it slowly starts to absorb little bits of protein that are floating in the air. And over time, it builds up and builds up and builds up, and you can see an example of what happens here. So the surface of the painting starts to patina. So you can see this was the painting in March after it sat exposed to the elements. And then this is it in November when it was first made of 23. And then this is what it looked like at the end of the process. And for those of you who are asking, how did I get this home? It's designed so that it can come off the panel and roll up. So it basically looks like a giant accordion. It's back in my studio currently. But the original impetus of making this work is that I was really, really interested in how do we talk about how do we express the gaps? So everything that you're seeing here in this surface, this is all the painting that I did. But the only way you can see the painting that I did is through the breaks and the rips and the ruptures in the surface. And if it doesn't shatter, then you don't see really the paint underneath, unless the skin itself is so thin that you can some of the hues of the color will show itself. I'll just show you a few images so you can get a sense of it. So it is still functionally a mirror. You can see yourself within it. Which to me is a great kind of metaphor for how we deal with mirrors, because mirrors in many ways are like the best liars. Like they don't actually tell us the truth. There's some inversion of it as well. But as you can see here, this is Freya, who might be mortified if I showed you this video, but it was really funny. This is the remnants of the glass left
I'd
behind.
have you be the one to fall
And
on
she's
it,
being the
okay?
model, walking across it. So right now, I'm really interested in
I know.
the remnants of this glass. But you can see this is all the paint which is left behind, all the mirror which is left behind as well. And I wish I could take some questions from you guys, because I realize
Take
we have.
questions from me.
Okay, I'm gonna get some questions for you. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I think it would be good to kind of Kurt Sang said, I grew up in Taipei. Hope you love the food there.
Oh, it was remarkable. I'm planning on opening a studio in Taipei at some point. I love the people. I just thought the culture was I just thought the people were kind and welcoming, and I thought that it was a very humane city. Uh, so like it really cared about its people and quality of life, you know.
So, you've given us two examples of two processes that are extremely different.
Mhm.
I wonder first, like, does the skinning the mirror fit within the gutter, the decentering and the dislocating?
Yeah, I think so. If you think about it, the the silver is slowly changing over time, right? And the thing that I'm trying to understand right now is how do different climates and also different environments, um, different communities, how does that impact the color, the patina, the kind of the buildup that chemically bonds itself to the silver? So in some ways, you know, I'm kind of decentering myself as the author in some ways because every time I make a layer of the surface, it is the front of the painting to me, right?
Mhm.
And then I build up another layer, and that one underneath disappears, and the one underneath disappears and disappears. And then once I lay the canvas down and I pull the surface off, some of it stays, some of it comes with the canvas. Um, and what it looks like ultimately is based on a number of kind of physical factors, material factors that I don't have complete control over. So it's sort of a bit of a dance as to what it looks like. So part of the decentering, if we were to sort of to use that one, as in I think it maybe dislocation might be a better one, which is that the thing that I'm actually talking about is not necessarily in the picture, right? And so when you're staring at the picture, it's the back of the painting for me, but it's the front of the painting for you. So the
Mhm.
question is like, where is the front? So like it doesn't really have one, right? This just kind of flips back and forth in a way, which I think is interesting. Um, and then I also like the idea um, that the metaphor and the literal kind of meet each other because the chemical bond that happens with the bits of DNA that are floating in the atmosphere is both metaphorical and literal, right? It is the thing that it's doing is based on what's there, but what's invisible to us. So it slowly builds up over time, and I can't predict what that will be or what color it will be.
Can you stop it?
Yeah, I do stop it eventually, and we'll seal the surface
Mm.
with a substance that can create a barrier between itself and the outside world. And then that's at a certain period of time that I deem it's long enough. Um, and some paintings I have that are still going for like 2 years and they become like a black mirror.
Mm.
Um, and I there's something I want to do with that in the future. Um, but there's another way that you could think about these not as paintings at all, which is that they possess a lot of the same qualities as a photograph,
Hmm.
but it's not exposure to light, but it's exposure to these bits of proteins that are floating in the atmosphere. Right. So like it is in some ways also a picture of that place, but it's non-representational,
It's
you know.
interesting. I thought you were going to say they are like a performance or the residue of a performance. So you have a documentation. So that was very surprising when you said a photograph.
There is a facet of that, um, which I actually did do a performance in Paris where we used this technique. I wasn't planning on showing it to you, but do you want to see it?
I'll take that as a yes from everybody as I would like to see it. Oh yeah, Kurt put his hand up. Somebody else did as well.
Thank you, Kurt, is our most active, our
And
most active hand raiser. I appreciate that. So this performance was called The Mirror Is You, and it was part of the Nuit Blanche Festival. Um, in in Paris in June of this year. Um, I I wrote and directed it with two of the actors that were in the show, Frank Lawson and Alex Barless, and they're two
They
of
were
the
in
actors.
Until.
One is in Until, and then the other one is in Boney, my other play that's loosely inspired by Milli Vanilli. So I'm gonna apologize that if the sound doesn't work, and I don't know how to fix that problem. But I'm gonna play it and then I'll talk over it if the
Edgar, the video was working, sorry, the audio was working before, just for you to know.
Okay, and then it stopped working.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been like coming and going, but sometimes we can still hear it.
Can you hear it now?
No.
No.
No, can't. What about now? Can you hear it now?
May I have everyone's attention?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to Lafayette, Louisiana.
It's a little.
My mother died here last week, and I buried her here just last week. My hands know the valleys and mountains while my fingers run across this canvas. You can't have my memories, all right? You can't have my history. This is my land. I don't claim the land. The land claimed me. The very thing he's trying to destroy, it's still alive in me. 200,000. Anybody got 200,000? 200,000. I see 200,000 right there. Oh, I love it. I love it. 200,000. Do good things because you want to. You do good things because you have to. There are people out there, their homes are being bombed. Their lives are being destroyed. Don't you get it? Thank you.
So, give my team their due. Thank you for the city of Paris for paying for all that. So it was a bit of an experiment to think about the performative aspects of it and to see what happens if I try to turn it into a kind of allegory. So the size of that canvas was 39 feet by 20 feet, 39 by 20 feet. So it's quite large.
Similar to the one in Taipei.
It's bigger than that one, yeah, by quite a bit. And yeah, it's bigger. And the idea was like that there's a guy whose land is being auctioned off by his father. And his father told him he has an hour to get off the land or he's going to be killed. So the audience is participating in an auction, and we made auction paddles for them to participate in purchasing the land. So instead of him trying to take his property that's left behind, he decides to take the land itself and discovers that there's this whole territory of memories and experiences that are underneath. So it's not in the trailer, but at different stages of different rooms of the house. And there was like a kind of a blueprint of the rooms of the house were on the face of the canvas in a very kind of simple way, that it would trigger certain memories and experiences that he had that he would be recalling. But he's not able to fully get to take the land away, and then he winds up being his father tries to kill him at the end of the show. It was a little less than an hour, and you know, yeah, I'm still chewing on it, trying to make sense of what parts of it worked. But I'll be honest with all of you, I'm not sure how well it worked. But it was
Is that it sounds like you were given an opportunity. That was Claire Tancon's, Adrian
Mhm.
Evans, same thing, Freya Chu
Yeah.
in Taipei. So at each stage, there's a situation, and a curator will come to you and say, "Hey, Edgar, we would like you to do something."
Yes.
and we will pay for you. So we will commission you. And it seems that in that kind of situation, that's where you decide to kind of push your practice in one direction or another in a way that you maybe haven't before.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, the title of my original talk was called embracing being a beginner. Like I'm constantly putting myself in risky situations where I don't know how things are going to work out. Um and just trust in my strategies and trust in my process that something interesting will come out of it. Um and in the case of this one, part of the reason why I feel uncertain about it is because, you know, it's Paris in June and we were certain that it would never rain. And it rained every single day of rehearsal. So we never were able to rehearse on site. We had to do it in the hotel room in our Airbnb for 5 days. And some sort of, you know, miracle, it stopped raining for an hour and a half to 2 hours for us to put the show up. And then it started raining again. Um,
It's crazy.
so, you know, part of it was like I didn't really get to I didn't get to fine tune it and really kind of make it like the way in which I do in those final days of rehearsal. We just lost all of that. Um,
What's
but
interesting is that with Until, you first did that 10 years ago,
yeah.
done it recently. And I know with the Boni Manili,
Mhm.
I mean, I saw one version of that was outside Suzanne Valmetter's
Yeah.
piece. And
Yeah.
that has, changed its form and developed and evolved. So
Yeah.
maybe the first time isn't intended to be the last anyway.
Exactly. And you know, and I'm a bit older now, so I understand that the devisement process takes time. I mean, Boney I've been working on for 8 years now, and the version that we'll do at the Walker in January. If you get any of you in Minneapolis, please come. The show is going to be January 23, 24, 25 at the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis. Um, we're rewriting scenes and I'm trying to truncate stuff and make things a little bit tighter and a little more streamlined. And um, sometimes it's just the way that it goes. Um, but I just want to connect another dot before we end this talk because we have 4 minutes.
4 minutes to connect a dot.
Yeah, connect the dot. So I just wanted to say that when I first started working on the skinning the mirror process, which was back in 2019 and then into 2020 into the pandemic, you know, I decided that I was going to stop making work the way in which I did in the past, which was typically I would have like a personal story I would want to tell. There was some sort of bigger history, and then there was some material process. That was a triangle for me to create a project. And what I decided to do with scanning the mirror was to shift that triangle where the material process was first, and then everything else would come secondary. So when I started working on this mirror technique idea, it actually happened a decade before I actually took it on seriously because I didn't think that it was important enough to focus on. But at the same time, I was making this work and cracking these mirrors. My mother's dementia really accelerated, and she started to, you know, lose her memory. She started to lose her ability to take care of herself, and me and my siblings became my mother's nurse. Um, so when I was working on the paintings in the daytime, and then I would go work, help take care of my mom, or take care of my mom, and then go to the studio and work on the paintings. And as I was making the skinning the mirror works, I kept telling myself, there is no story here. Just allow yourself to respond to what you did the day before. But over time, what happened was that my mother's body and her memory kind of degrading or becoming foggy, and this process of making paintings on mirrors that were cracking and peeling the skin back, and it looks old and aged and withered and wrinkled. It started to look like it started to mimic certain things that were happening to my mom's mind as well as to her body. And when I realized that these two operations were happening side by side, I saw that even though I intended for the work to not be a story, there was one that was trailing alongside it, you know. So when I was there, me and my siblings were there when my mom passed away. You know, I I started to understand like profoundly what metaphors were for, because when she died, it wasn't a moment, it wasn't an instant, but it lasted about 17 minutes of us trying to figure out if she had really gone or not. So like her ghost was present, and in some way, like a broken mirror is actually more akin to that experience and more akin to real life than uh, a whole mirror.
Mm.
And that painting process is actually part of Boni Manelli. That painting process in the show. So if you come and see the show, then you'll see those connections, because I was writing the play at the same time as
So
making.
just one question in relation to that, thinking about what you did for Nuit Blanche, where there's another narrative that went over the top. Was that a process of trying to kind of decenter again your story and put something else in relation to or is that maybe one of the reasons why it's
Yeah,
like another
yeah,
facet?
yeah. Like I think, and then what happened when I went and visited Ben Vereen, and he asked me if I wanted to see the video of his original performance. He sat on the floor in front of the TV, and I was sitting behind him. And I realized that these windows of time had aligned themselves at that very moment. Here we are in the present. Now he's 70 years old and he's watching himself perform in his 30s, performing a guy from, 1920. So like these windows line up. And I'm always trying to figure out how to line up those windows.
Mm.
I'm always trying to figure out how to show both the transient present as well as the archetypal past. Like, and I feel like if you can line those things up, that you have a very deep and kind of lasting relationship to ideas.
Amazing. I think we'll leave it there because the generosity and the way in which you've managed to kind of put so many starting points and thoughts into this 1 hour has been incredible. So thank you, Edgar, for that.
My pleasure. And thank you all for coming. I hope you found the experience engaging. Also, if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, that might be a best way for you to communicate with me. Those of you who are still on the chat, which is Edgar_3 at Instagram. But anyway, thank you all for coming.
Great, thank you. And for those that are in the class, we'll see you in the other Zoom.